Just a quick warning, this episode contains some strong language, so be advised, shit's about to get real. On day 3 of Counterintelligence's production, we were shooting an overnight from 9 p.m. to 9 a.m., and something went wrong.
The tendency for most people would have been to get defeatist and panic, and I really dedicated the time and the effort and the energy to trying to make sure that I could be the rock for everyone, and keep things going straight and just stay positive and not be blindly optimistic, but be, rational about things and reasonable.
As much as location manager Rachel Meyer, who you'll remember as our casting director from the last episode, would never want to admit it, it could have happened to anybody at any level of the game.
I think about it. I think about it every day, Chris. Every day of my life, I think about it.
You're kidding? Oh no. Well, don't think about it too much. Don't.
Okay. Well, I'm hoping getting it off my chest with you, will help with the healing.
Yeah. Cathartic, I hope.
Yeah, totally.
She's being way too hard on herself, but also true to those Type A tendencies. She gleaned an important lesson about location scouting.
Extremely important. Lesson learned on Chris's film that I would like to spread to the world so that you don't make the same mistake. So important to visit the location during the time of day or night that you will be filming there.
Our prime shooting hours were in the middle of the night. The issue we had was very specific to this particular type of location, outside a brewery, when the temperature drops. Hanging on the edge of your seat, white knuckling, well, you have to wait a couple more episodes to find out what exactly happened because it plays heavily into producing this movie. And that's not where we're at yet. Prep is an extensive subject, so I knew early on it would require at least 2 episodes outside what we've already dealt with. Episodes 5 and 6 will deal with the world of pre-production, starting with nuances of locations, crewing up, contracts, gearing up, wardrobe, and props. And that's just this episode. I stand by. The main reason we were even able to pull off a 7-day feature film shoot was the amount of attention to comprehensively prepping. Some people hate prep, but I actually like it, because by the time you get to production, there's a good chance you've already solved a lot of problems, if you've done it right. Great art is about time. Time costs money, and deciding where you'll put time in dedicates how much the rest of your time costs. So, in the interest of time, let's pre-produce this movie. Part 1.
A free film. For no money, for no anything. Half of the battle to make a good film in the United States. A free film, when I say good film, it's a free film. Whether it's good or bad, we don't know. But we'll put a year in for no money, for no anything. Simply because there's an expression that has to be said. Now, we don't have any reverence for this expression. We don't believe it's a church. We have to have a good time, otherwise we die. I mean, how much does this cost? Paper to do the hard work, and how much does reels cost? We get it all from the major studios. They help us destroy them. That's the way we work. Because if we make a good film, they will only suffer. And as they suffer, they come and they say, please make films for us. And we say, no, we don't want to make films for you. Hip, hip, hooray.
Before Rachel looks for locations, she takes an inventory.
Similar to character breakdowns, I'll go through the script and make a list of every single location needed. And I'll make a spreadsheet in the drive folder and list all the locations. Some locations may come really easy, where I've either filmed there before or know the owner or have, some other great options right off the bat. And I'll start by going to these locations and take a bunch of photos for the director or producers to see.
If she knows the location, she knows its parameters. This was true of 2 locations she brought to Counterintelligence. But what all is she looking for? First, she puts on her creative hat.
If the background's too busy or if it's not bold enough, so that's the first thing I'm looking for. I feel like I can tell when, nope, that would look absolutely shitty on camera, so I'm not even going to take a picture, or that would look really nice or fit the mood of the scene or whatever else. So that's number one. So number one is creative, and the look of the place is just really, really important.
Then she thinks technically, how complicated would it be to shoot there, starting with hours?
So, for example, if it's a cafe location and they're closed on Mondays, that's really excellent because you can be like, hey, we can come in on a Monday. You may have to pay someone to come in and supervise that works at the cafe, but that's really convenient for them because it won't disrupt business. So it's things like that I'm looking for. Or you can always offer to shoot after they close at 4 p.m. or whatever. Then I'll look at the surrounding area. So is there a lot of noise? Is it on a busy street? Parking is a priority, especially for a bigger crew, when you'll need parking permits for like bigger trucks and everything. And then electricity and bathrooms are another concern.
For our 3-location hunt, she took a few pictures of each prospect that met her criteria.
And then I'll create a PDF with the images that says like office location, option 1, option 2, option 3, and kind of list them out, see which ones they're interested in. Because at first I'll just take photos, because if the director doesn't want to shoot at a place, why would I go through the trouble of meeting up with the owner and asking and stuff, So if they hate the look of the place, there's no reason to take it to the next step.
I went through a PDF and gave input on the ones I liked most, which gave Rachel the go-ahead to contact the owners.
Are they excited about the project, or do they have a wicked bad attitude about it, from the get-go? Or are they going to ask like a ridiculous amount of money? So a lot of it's just reading that person, like while I'm talking to them.
If an owner's on the fence or the least bit skeptical, you could be in for way more problems than you're willing or able to tackle. If an owner's excited, you're probably on the right track. The thing with locations is, you gotta be okay talking to people.
I do feel sometimes in the indie world we're afraid to ask, advice from people or like connections from people, and it's all about asking, it's like ask everyone in the industry. I found like really great locations simply by making a post that says, hey, I'm looking for an office location for a one-day shoot. Does anyone know anything? And I'll get five messages, and then I'll follow up on those and see what if they'll fit it or not.
Right.
I think it's really important in the indie world to use the resources around you, and that includes asking others who have the experience or connection. And then, like I said, I'll go to any of those leads that I come up with and take photos and talk with the owners of the property to see if it's even a possibility. And then I'll figure out, the necessary permits and insurance required.
Sometimes the location requires certain insurance coverage, which could also make or break your ability to shoot there. I've put it off for a while, but in the next episode, we'll cover insurance in more depth. For now, the next steps: how long, how difficult, and whether permits are required.
Private homes are pretty easy because it's more about finding the right look or, friends of friends of friends who are cool with you filming and taking over their house. A park will require permits unless they're guerrilla shooting in Portland. Some locations really have surprised me in the past where like I was like, oh, office space, easy, and then it ended up taking a lot longer. So as a filmmaker in the indie world, you really want to make sure you give yourself time to lock down these locations and really prioritize it instead of saving it. You don't want your whole cast locked down and the schedule locked down and you haven't even touched your location.
Permits are hit or miss, at least in Portland. In a place like LA, from my understanding, it's nearly impossible to shoot anywhere without permits and paying a fee. It's a movie town, everybody knows the drill. But other cities and towns aren't typically hip to that. And if you live in a smaller community, you'll probably be more likely to meet people who just want to help and have their space featured. The main thing to remember when finding locations is that it's best to allow yourself adequate time so you're not concerned. I brought Rachel on for this a little late in the game. I wouldn't suggest this approach. Again, I circle back to being prepared and working well in advance, but we'd had a key location fall apart and Rachel had offered her services earlier, so I just eventually took her up on it. She also has a special gift for nailing down free or extremely cheap locations. Note her previous career in political fundraising.
And it's funny because negotiating for locations is kind of the opposite of what I used to do. With fundraising, I used to start by asking for a large amount and work my way down. And then with locations, I start by asking to shoot there for free and work my way up, if they're not having it. However, it is important for me to note that if there is money in the budget, and I know that it is going to be a huge undertaking on a location, then I will always offer a little something.
And a final note from Rachel, you gotta be good with people, or at least try. Like we've said before, don't be an asshole.
I think it is crucial to be personable and honest whenever you're trying to get a location. If it's a micro budget, I will be honest about it and focus on getting them excited about the project instead. Talking about film in general, getting them excited about us using their location instead of focusing on how they would benefit financially from it. Like being friendly and listening to their concerns goes a really long way. One of my biggest pet peeves in the industry is when a location manager is not honest about how much of an undertaking, even on the low budget scale, a shoot is. And I am always completely honest with how many people will be there, the potential of damage, and how as a crew we will do everything in our power to prevent that damage, giving examples of ram board on the floor or however we're going to protect their property. As the location manager, I am the very first person the owner will meet, and so I want them to be able to trust me, because this is their first impression of the crew. And people smell bullshit a mile away, and so if you go and say, oh, it's not going to be a big deal, we're just going to come in and get out in an hour, and like not a big deal, and then it turns into this fucking 10-hour shoot, and it is a huge deal, then they're going to be pissed, and that's what I avoid, and I think they can see the honesty and appreciate that.
Rachel dialed in 3 really solid locations for us super quickly, 2 separate office spaces, and an outdoor parking lot where we'd encounter the unexpected issue. That very issue could have been resolved while scouting, but not necessarily by Rachel.
Bring along the sound guy for location scouting if that happens, because you may think you're listening to something, but you're thinking about what it looks like, you're thinking about the action, you're thinking about all these other things, and you don't notice there's a big, huge factory next door.
No, there was no working factory next door. That wasn't the problem. You still have to wait, but you can probably guess who that was. Tim Kahn, Counterintelligence's location sound mixer.
I got involved with counterintelligence because I have worked with Rachel, who's the casting director, before on a couple of different things, and I guess you had asked her for some recommendations, and luckily she recommended me. I'm very thankful for that, and it worked out.
We had a stupid small crew. Myself, DP Mike Elliott, co-producer and art director Andrea Tolbert, Rachel Meyer, associate producer Chelsea Ray, and Tim.
Sound is a point in the triad of like the 3 parts to making a film. You have the actors, you have the camera, and you have the sound. Like those things are all equal, and without one of those, like it won't be a successful project.
I heard Mark Duplass in an interview say that he has a firm no asshole policy in terms of collaborators, and I couldn't agree more. I'm pretty particular about team building. Think of any job you've ever had. There are coworkers you liked, and then the ones who just fucking suck. Oh, no. When you're producing a project and hiring, you're basically staffing up a company. Who wants to subject people to an unfriendly work environment? Hiring right is important, and I pride myself on paying close attention. On Counterintelligence, everyone related really well and valued each other's positions. Here's DP Mike Elliott.
If you have shitty audio, it is my belief that your film is fucked, because no one wants to sit there and listen to a bad sounding film.
You see, Mike began his career in the audio world and went visual. Tim started in visual departments. The great result is they respect one another's positions and speak each other's languages. This makes for a really easy on-set dynamic, especially with a crew this small. Here they both are. Tim first.
Audiences are pretty comfortable watching stuff that doesn't look good, especially with like things like YouTube and cell phone video and like the 24-hour news cycle.
George Lucas says what? Sound is 50% of the movie, and I don't agree with that. I think sound's
75.
Yeah. I think it's higher because our ears have evolved faster than our eyes have. Our eyes are our eyes are slow and stupid. Like 16 frames per second, we go, hey, look at that movie. It's not a movie.
Blair Witch Project is always kind of like the perfect example of this, where it doesn't really look good, but people are able to put that aside, but they aren't really able to put aside really crappy sound.
But our ears, on the other hand, like, you know, takes 44.1, you know, cycles per second in order for our ears to be fooled by digital sound.
And really crappy sound can be kind of hard to define. I mean, whether it's distorted, too quiet, like too echoey, whatever. Because if you can't understand what the people are saying, the story gets lost. You know, think about how many movies, if you just put them on silent, like, would you know what's going on?
Now, as obvious as that may seem, it's a philosophy. A priority shared on set that contributes to comfortable and trusting collaborations. On our film, no one ever second-guessed the decisions of a professional in the moment because we shared an understanding that we were all motivated and qualified to make the best film we could. I hire for mutual respect, so everyone has each other's backs. On a little film like this, it was easy to do, but it can also be easy to neglect when you're making last-minute or money-driven decisions. An ancillary benefit of this respect and shared language, many potential problems can be easily solved between collaborators without me, which frees me up to work with actors and make other on-the-spot decisions. Tim was the only on-set crew member I hadn't worked with before, so hiring proceeded the same way it did with Rachel. I checked out his work, I liked it, then we exchanged some emails. I liked his professionalism, so I sent him the script and told him not to accept the job unless he liked the material. He read it, appreciated it, I think. Then we met for lunch and got on really well. A lot of good hiring is just trusting your gut instinct. Are they nice, polite, professional? Are they honest? By the time we're meeting face to face, I already know their work is solid. I want to know how their personality jives with mine. If I apply those same principles to each collaborator, I'm identifying whether everyone will get along with each other. I cannot understate the importance of honesty either, because there will be times you'll need to default to crew expertise, and you want to know the people you're bringing aboard can shoot straight. So I'll typically ask a revealing question relating to the project. In Tim's case, I asked about the schedule.
Oh, and I mean, I remember when we met and you told me we were going to shoot in 7 days, and I was like, that's a pretty bad idea. You know, like probably the shortest amount of days I ever worked on a feature is probably 20. Part of the reason I joined the project was to see how it would go, honestly. And I think I told you that in the beginning, because I was genuinely curious to see like how it would go. I mean, maybe I'm just like a masochist.
Well, I knew it would work, but that was secondary. I wanted to see how he felt about it, if he'd be real with me, and if he was up for the challenge. Like he said, maybe he's just a masochist, but either way, everything checked out. One thing I noticed about Tim really early on that seemed important, he's a Zen master. He tends toward the quiet, observant, and introspective side. He'll be assertive when necessary, but he's very laid back. And on a set with Mike, who I bicker with like a sibling, and Dre, who's also my girlfriend, Tim's disposition seemed valuable. By that point, we already had the schedule dialed, so it was pretty much a matter of yes, I'm free, or no, I'm not. And he was. So I locked Tim down a mere few weeks before production started. At this point, the final HR type item was contracts. It's the production's responsibility to provide them, and if need be, there can be a negotiation. More often than not, on bigger budgets, lawyers get involved, but on this little flick, as long as the basic tenets of a contract were fulfilled, lawyers weren't necessary. Though, I would say, as a producer, if you don't have much experience with contracts and legalese, I have a moderate amount, I'd urge you to consult a lawyer. In the meantime, though, I used a service called Shake Law. That's definitely a plug, because Shake Law is amazing. It's a cloud-based app found at shakelaw.com, where I access their big collection of pre-made contracts for various crew members. You just fill in the basic information like your production company name, the prospective cast or crew member's name, their rate, when you'll pay them, and all that easy stuff. Then, through Shake, you send them a contract directly to their email, they sign it digitally, hit a button, and send it back to your Shake account. There, it gets stored in the cloud for you to access at all times. I also recommend printing backups for each. It's a very easy and trustworthy system for quick contract work. They even provide legal consultation at low cost if you need a professional to look over your documents, but don't know anyone personally. Shake's built specifically for independent businesses, particularly in the arts, with prefab contracts just for indie filmmakers, including ones for cinematographers, casting services, actors, location releases, composers, and general crew members you can tailor to whomever needs one. I used it for the entire crew. I also gave some amount of profit participation to a few key crew members, and Shake let me specify those percentages within each document. It's a really awesome service. Check it and sign up at the link in the show notes. You can also see some sample contracts and tutorials by visiting and signing up at showhawk.com/makethismovie. After contracts were signed, crew members were locked down, locations in place. It was time to take a last look at gear. Gear. Most filmmakers' best friend. What gear do collaborators bring to a production? What about rentals? We're not going to spend a great deal of time here because it's the thing we all tend to read about most. If you're an indie filmmaker, you probably have a pretty good idea of how you gear up for a feature, but I want to cover our strategies behind gearing up because, well, it's dope. So for all you gearheads out there, let's take a second to go down the tech rabbit hole. Here's Mike Elliott spitting details on his camera, which the production used. You ready, gearheads?
We shot on Sony A7S II, which, it's like a junior varsity camera. But it does have, I would say, it can do varsity moves. Like when you're shooting on this particular camera, in particular, we were on, for most days, we were on Picture Profile 7, which is Sony S-Log 2. You have the ability to record pretty flat and even, and when you come into post, once you establish your highlights and establish your shadow mark, you can boost saturation 6 different ways to Sunday, and you can get a versatility or a different sort of like cache of looks. And so that would be a very good reason why we do that. I mean, if you record on like an ARRI Alexa, then that's great. You had a budget to do that. Go you. But if you don't have that sort of budget, this camera is a pretty good, cheap, sort of introductory, sort of what I would call, I guess, a prosumer camera.
The key benefit to shooting on the Sony A7S II, especially on this tight of a budget, is that its flat picture profile allowed us to shoot for optimal dynamic range to compensate for lacking control over our environment. On a budget like this, you're not always able to move or even have lights. In addition to how you compose a shot for natural light, shooting in a picture profile that allows flexibility to find a look in post is like an insurance policy. With a flat picture profile, you can pivot later on and have extra range to match shots or make quality adjustments. That said, it comes with some liabilities.
When you're shooting on the Picture Profile 7, you are having to start the day at an ISO of 1600.
So in case you're not as acquainted with tech jargon, ISO measures the sensitivity of your camera's sensor to light, not the lens. The lower the ISO, the less sensitive it is. The higher, more light comes in. When there isn't enough light in the environment, though, you can end up with a more grainy image.
I know everyone says, the ISO on these cameras is through the roof, and so you're more than welcome to go up to 128,000 ISO, but I really do not like to go above 3200. I really am of the belief that if you go above that ISO, you're starting to create a picture quality that is just a lot more degraded, and if that's something that you are going for, then you've got what you need. But again, I know that that's a move that I can do in post, and so I don't want to really commit to a degraded footage that isn't going to be able to hold up, I guess, in quality as to the shots that are shot during the day. Now, that being said, it definitely was a delicate dance when we were doing some of our night scenes. I would do my very best to take what practical lights we had in the environment and what very little lights we were afforded on production to try to make it so that I wouldn't have to boost my ISO, but there was just a couple different times where if I didn't, I would have garbage in the video to give to the editor, which no one wants.
So to manage grain during night shoots, he worked with what we had, doing the best he could. Fortunately, there was only one night shoot. During the day, how did he deal with light?
I found myself using both variable neutral density filters as well as variable polarizers to try to stop the amount of light that was coming in from being so intense and allowing me to go to a shallower depth of field. A lot of the movie was shot intentionally between F8 and 4 for the most part for daytime stuff, and then at nighttime stuff, I think there are a couple times where we were afforded some lenses that actually stopped down to about 1.4, and that's probably where we were hanging the whole night through.
To combat harsh daylight, Mike used neutral density and polarizing filters, which are small glass filters that dim the light coming in, like sunglasses for your lens. This allows the DP to open up the aperture wide to let in more light without blowing out the image, and get a shallower depth of field. Essentially, a sharper focus on the subject with a softer background, which is a huge contributor to the classically cinematic look. This leads us to lenses. Glass. Mike and I had access to a Canon 50mm 1.4, a Canon 24 to 70mm, and a Canon 70 to 200mm telephoto. For a full-frame mirrorless sensor, basically a sensor equivalent to a 35mm camera, where you get the full scope and functionality of the lenses, these were pretty well-ranging options, but we also wanted a wide angle that could play at a more open aperture to match the other tighter ones. For that, we went to Profoto for rentals in Portland. I called them out in a previous episode for their service and support, namely Tamra, who was awesome, so again, shout out to Tamra. Lens-wise, for the entire shoot, we rented a Zeiss 28mm f2.0, which ran us $35 a day. Not too bad. And those 4 lenses were it on counterintelligence. In terms of additional camera equipment, Mike requested early on that we employ an external monitor. The A7S II display is small, it's awkward to maneuver, and visually really unreliable. The money spent on an external display would ensure that the images we'd think we were getting would be the ones we got. He sold me on using the Atomos Shogun, not just as a monitor, but also as a camera controller and a capture device. This last feature was huge. See, if you know post-production well, you know that in order for DSLRs and most prosumer cameras to store high-resolution videos on a small media card, they need to compress those files. Then, when you go to dump those files into pro editing software, it expands the files to full format. This is fine, but it takes some time. The Shogun saved us this step by recording the footage directly to its own flash drives at full 4K Apple ProRes quality, the pro editing standard video file format, which means the files coming into my editing software were already at full quality. The Shogun's overall a pretty awesome tool, but we didn't just want to carry it around or risk mounting it to the top of a camera with a flimsy little arm, so we also rented a wooden camera quick cage, which is basically a small cage to mount the camera in, with a bunch of sturdier mounting holes on its bars. So, for the first 20 or so minutes of every shoot day, Mike would build the cage, mount the camera in it, and mount the Shogun on the cage, which also added some extra weight to the camera, which helped stabilization. The Shogun ran us $75 a day, the cage $30, and with the lens that put us to $140 a day in rental costs. Not bad, but even better, as I mentioned in another episode, our shoot was mostly done on weekends, which meant we'd pay a single day's cost on Friday and return the gear on Monday. With Tamra's help, we were also able to rent Profoto's brand new Ronin gimbal stabilizer for $50 for one of our shoots. She let us hold onto it from a Tuesday through the following Monday on a holiday weekend for a single day's cost, provided we come back with insights since they'd just gotten it in and were collecting reviews. Again, I can't say this enough. Bless you, Tamra. So our grand total rental costs for the 7-day shoot came in at $470. Add to that the extra we spent on renting that and some other gear we didn't end up using on a test day, and you have a grand total of $654 on rentals. We ran tests the weekend before the shoot so Mike could get acquainted, which is key to making the first day run that much smoother. Could we have gotten more? Yeah, sure. You can always get more. You can fill your set with esoteric shit and nice-to-haves, and we certainly could have invested another $100 or so in creature comforts, but when money's tight, you have to be calculated. All this gear came from a list I asked Mike for. I prompted him, as I often do, for 2 separate lists. One I call the bare bones, and the other sugar and spice. Bare bones is the list of minimum essentials to get the project done. Sugar and spice, and everything nice, is his absolute ideal gear list. I do this on nearly every project with myself and collaborators. In a perfect world, we meet somewhere in the middle. On counterintelligence, we definitely skewed towards bare bones. Everything was well justified, well used, and made somebody's life easier at some stage in the process. So with that, we moved to lighting. Lighting's primary motivators were obviously locations. As I've said from the beginning, much of the film was shot in my apartment, which I know, and Mike took some time to scout. Other than that, we had 2 offices, a parked car, and a night exterior. A big no-no on micro budgets, but what can I say? Tim's not the only masochist here. For interiors, we kept it simple. Mike and I picked up some China balls, you know, those thin paper-lined wire orbs you put light bulbs in, 5 for $36, and 4 hanging lights to put inside for $20. Boom. 4 soft boxes we could move around, hang from ceilings, or mount on some lighting stands I had. This $56 setup was most of our lighting. On our night shoot, we had a friend and past collaborator, Ben Bach, who was able to loan us his lighting kit at kind of the last minute when Mike realized we might be in a corner. The power of friendships. Thank you, Ben. There were only 3 additional pieces of visual gear on the budget. A 5x7 foot portable green screen for a single shot in the movie you hopefully won't notice, a small camera windshield mount for vehicle interior shots, and a lens adapter we never ended up using. The screen was $51.19, the car mount, $27.12, and the adapter was $50 even. All bought on Amazon, bringing the total equipment budget to $838. Under $1,000? Killing it! I cannot stress this enough. Talk about the demands of the shoot in depth, be strategic, don't make flagrant decisions, run tests, and communicate with your collaborators early and often about gear demands and requirements. All these actions paid in dividends. For the most part, we were very agile and prepared when the shoot came around. I particularly emphasized communication with Tim about sound because, like most visual filmmakers, my knowledge of the audio world is limited.
I actually worked on something where I was the boom op for a mixer who didn't have his own equipment, and the production provided the equipment, and they basically said, I went to B&H and was like, give me whatever is the most expensive thing. And like, that's good equipment. Like, there's no way around it. But like, in particular, the microphones were not good for what we were doing. And they just didn't know that. But if they'd asked, like, if they'd hired someone who either like had the equipment or just in pre-production was like, here's what we're trying to do, make us a package or whatever.
Tim and I had talked about it over our first lunch and went over some questions he had. Counterintelligence was pretty basic from an audio perspective, mostly, and I stress mostly, quiet in contained locations and no more than 2 people on screen talking at a time. Hey! This bears remembering while crafting a story. Simple from the page, makes for simpler production. In any case, Tim had all of what we needed.
Yeah, so basically I have a bag with my mixer recorder in it and like with the wireless receivers. In narrative work, the boom operator's primary function is to know the script. So a lot of the times when, the camera's setting up, like I'm memorizing the script, so I know who to point the mic at. If everyone is in labs, it's a little easier because I don't have to move the mic around. But yeah, I kind of really enjoy that process of like learning the script and, figuring out like, oh, this guy's walking across the room. I have a, 12-foot pole. Like, how can I move so that I'm not in the shot and I can capture his dialogue? Because for me, like pretty much almost all the time, a boom sounds a little better to me. I guess maybe more natural is the right word. And I think most sound guys would say that they really prefer using a boom if given the opportunity over a lav, just for a lot of reasons like clothing, noise, and all that stuff. So yeah, like I have like the script on my iPad that I keep in my bag. My mixer, I can take notes on like, the name of the scene, all that stuff.
And that was essentially it for sound gear. If you employ a location sound mixer, it is worth asking if they charge a production rental fee for their gear. Many do. Just a good tidbit of info to clarify in advance. One last thing that was brought up by both Mike and Tim in our prep conversations.
I think, if anything, what could have been better on the production as a whole was as if we had had more of a budget to be able to get at least one more person on set to be able to lighten the load on the rest of us.
So on counterintelligence, I did everything, sound-wise, which isn't necessarily like the best way to work.
An additional crew member that could be there to lend a helping hand to their respective departments.
I would have to build camera because we were using that little wooden camera box, or we were using the Ronin. I would have to take that time that I would normally spend with camera, divorcing myself from it, and go and scout out electrical so that we could have lights. And, that took minutes to try to figure out how many electrical cables is it going to be able to take to get all the way down to this conduit that's on the far end of the building.
I try to argue if the camera has an assistant, then the sound mixer should have an assistant. That's one of those things I try to argue always. But the camera in counterintelligence did not have an assistant. So I can't really argue that I get an assistant, which was fine because, we shot it in like a crazy tight schedule. We needed to move fast, and, having extra people around slows things down.
Aside from slowing us down, the budget just didn't have room. Overhead was low, but I noted their requests for next time. Not to degrade from their logic, bear in mind the context of how small this project actually was, they made it work extremely well. In the future, and given more money though, the benefits of having a person or a couple people on set to help with these specific technicalities are absolutely clear.
Having to wear so many hats was probably the one thing that I would love to change. And if I were to say do a film like this again, I would say keep it sort of departmental, have audio department, camera department, and then have lighting department. Because you basically had wardrobe, like that's what Dre was doing.
I usually am a photo stylist.
Andrea Tolbert, or affectionately, Dre. Who forgot about Dre?
Sometimes in different jobs that I have, I put on different hats, either producer or project manager and styling.
On Counterintelligence, her official titles were art director and producer. She handled wardrobe, much of the prop buying, a bit of set decoration where we could, and overall on-set logistics. As far as props go, remember the list of props I made in episode 2 on budgeting? Dre basically followed that list, hit Amazon and some local stores, and did the same thing she does for advertising clients.
So if it were interiors, let's say we're doing a bedroom set, but they want it themed like Southwestern bedroom set, I go around Portland or I go on Amazon and I search for materials and items that will best be suited for that shoot. And that sounds like really easy and fun of like, oh, you're just shopping. No, you have to really understand the vision and the scope of what that art director and what that company wants. If you don't have a huge budget, you have to work outside of the box.
Pretty good fit, right? Exactly what Counterintelligence needed. Since props were pretty minimal and self-explanatory, much of Dre's time spent in prep was on wardrobe.
This was a very relaxed film with not a lot of changes because it happens in like 2 days.
Because the story took place in a limited window of time, wardrobe wasn't insanely complex. But it's an art, and Dre's understated creative process is key. Listen to her describing her favorite Counterintelligence character to clothe, Angela's smarmy, douchey-ass neighbor, Jeff.
World's totally gnar out there for chicks, right? Yeah, but I know, I mean, I'm not trying to give myself a tug or nothing, but, no stranger, that's all I'm saying. Must be just, shit.
Wow, like I can visualize who this person is. I just envision Jeff as like being like really cool and wearing scarves, but like wearing like really flashy t-shirts, but having them too small. Because like he's just a mess. Like he just wants to show off his body. Because I got multiples of shirts. It almost made it
better though buying the really tight clothes because it's like, look what I'm working for, you know what I mean?
No, yeah. And when he tried on the large, you're like, oh, you look like a normal person. You still look semi-douchey, but the smaller clothes, and he had like really tight pants on. And I just felt like I put on those bracelets and those like necklaces, and he just really felt the character because he was dressed. Like, that's not how he dresses.
No.
We know so many people like that. He was actually dressed after a person that we both know.
Or Angela herself.
She is in the advertising industry. She's a PA. She doesn't have a lot of money. She shouldn't have nice things. Her families are not rich. You can tell the people, like PA people in the industry, who they come from money, and because they have nice clothes, and you're just like, how are you doing this? You make nothing. You know, versus people that are trying to get in the industry and don't know anyone in the industry, and they work really hard, and you know, they don't have a lot of money to buy nice clothes, but they make it work. You're just working really hard, and you don't want to wear a silk shirt because you're going to sweat through it.
Our male protagonist, Abel.
He doesn't read GQ. He doesn't know anything about fashion. He would love like khaki pleated pants and like a really big shirt because he's more of a comfort guy.
Or the head of the intelligence agency, Ms. Evelyn Goldwyn.
How I kind of wanted to dress her, but we couldn't afford to do that, is an Inside Man, Jodie Foster. That's who I was trying to like envision Marcella as. And Jodie Foster, an Inside Man, she's wearing like, you know, Dolce & Gabbana and really expensive clothing that we couldn't necessarily afford, but Marcella had some really nice pieces, and I think we pulled it off.
Dre has an innate sensibility about how different types of people with different lifestyles dress. I think the thing she's always considering, though she's never said it to me directly, real people dress themselves. Characters in a contemporarily set movie like this shouldn't appear to have been dressed by a professional. Film wardrobe creates a sense of authenticity. Most of the time, audiences should take it for granted. She and I agree on that, so how'd she pull it off?
I basically had to shop for Abel, Sheree, and Adam.
Adam Elliott played Jeff, and his were among the few costumes money was actually spent on.
Because our budget was so tight, we couldn't really afford to go out and buy everyone new things. Everyone has a pair of slacks, everyone has a button-up. We didn't have to go out and buy those things if our actors already had them. So I had them send me pictures of what they had.
She'd collect these pictures for each actor, having sent them some basic ideas, and also receiving their own input. On the strength of these pictures, she'd combine shirts, pants, coats, shoes, and other pieces into concepts for looks. Similar to what Rachel did with locations, Dre would send me these pics for input. More often than not, I wouldn't have a whole lot to say except little nitpicky things, and she'd always send multiple choices. Then, after we agreed on pictures, or sometimes amidst that process, she'd make house calls, like with Sheree, who played Angela.
For Sheree, I went over her house and I was like, hey, can I look through your stuff? And she was more than happy to do so. And I was only supposed to be over there for like 15 minutes. And I think I was over there for like 2 hours. And we were just like chatting up a storm. It was hilarious. And so I took some pictures of what she had, and then I kind of cohesively put them all together.
She also did the same with Marcella to achieve Goldwyn's Jodie Foster look.
She had a lot of good things in her closet that I just pulled from that I felt were right for her role.
She did this for pretty much everybody, but as she said, she had to buy a few pieces for Sheree.
Because there was a throw-up scene and we needed to get double shirts.
Angela's main shirt gets ruined, so Dre picked up 2 of the same inexpensive tees. And for Abel, Brian,
shoes and a shirt, a sports coat. But I went to Goodwill for that, and I don't think it cost us, I think it was like $60 for everything. I let him keep the shoes, because he was like, these are the most comfortable shoes in the world. And I was like, you can have them. Got them at Goodwill. They were like $20. They were nice shoes, though.
They were, really.
Yeah, I was super surprised.
and Jeff, Adam. The 2 hilarious outfits for the most outlandishly douchey-ass character in the movie. Dre's favorite costume to compile.
I went to Nordstrom and I picked out all of these shirts and pants, and I had him wear it for, 3 hours, and then I returned it.
Before you say, oh man, that's awesome, you can do that, or whoa, that's really fucked up, guys.
Is that fairly common in the...
Yes. It's very common. in this industry, you'll buy, let's say, $1,500 worth of clothes. You have to try on stuff to see if it fits. You buy what you use, and if you don't use it, you return it. So usually on my other jobs, if I'm clothing 3 people, I'll buy them 6 outfits, so 2 outfits per person to see what looks best, what the background is, what are the colors. Sometimes you have to swap out a yellow shirt for a blue shirt because someone else already is wearing blue, so you don't want them to all be matchy-matchy. But on this one, what we did was we just went to Nordstrom's, we got a whole bunch of clothes, and we returned them all.
Have you done that on any other gigs where you buy and return stuff?
Like flat?
Stuff that gets used?
Yeah.
So we're not...
That's why everyone goes to Nordstrom's.
Dre, and I'm sure other industry folks who do the same job, feel bad about this in some sense, but as long as the clothes aren't damaged and you're being responsible and respectful with them, I don't think it's such a bad thing, particularly if they're only being used for a couple hours. Adam was on our completely contained indoor set for about 3 hours total with 2 different outfits, so it made sense and saved us a ton of money.
I spend so much money at Nordstrom's anyways, just for my personal. And so when I do have a really big account, a bloated account that I'm working for, I will always go back and I work with, the same people. And, we buy so much from there and we don't ever take it back. So it's a give and a take where one day I'll have a budget of like $2,000 and I'll go over there and I'll spend $1,500 and I never take stuff back. And then we'll have like on your movie where, I only bought $250 worth of clothes. So it wasn't crazy expensive, but I did return $250 worth of clothes.
Nordstrom is like socks.
Yeah, which I looked in the sale rack. The ugliest shirts are in the sale rack because nobody wants them. And that was Jeff because he has no style.
Nordstrom's return policies definitely enable this, as do many other retailers for now. This could absolutely change at any time, and many retailers have specific policies about whether they want the tag still on, or at least in hand, for the returns. People return stuff every day, though. Just, again, be respectful and
just make sure that you're returning it within the 30 days. Or look at their policy and make sure that you return it, because you don't want your budget to be bloated afterwards.
That's how we got $250 worth of wardrobe for basically $0. To reiterate, this is super common in the industry, particularly in high-volume advertising work. As far as overall budget takeaways from Dre,
for me, I like to know what my budget is. How many looks, how many days, are we doing multiples, and breaking all of that down. What does that mean? I don't know what our budget was. It was like $150 or something crazy like that. I bought Sheree her 2 shirts. I'm pretty sure they were $20 a piece, so that was $40. Brian's shoes were, I think, $20. His coat was like $30, and then I bought him something else. So I'm pretty sure I went to Goodwill, and it was like $60. So that's $100 already.
She didn't plan purchases until she'd already picked from actors' closets. And when she did buy, she bought strategically. All told, Dre dressed everyone in the movie for $160. And that's how she pulled off a solid wardrobe for counterintelligence. The props she picked up ran us $246.97, under my projected budget. So with locations, crew, contracts, gear, props, and wardrobe locked down, shooting this movie was getting closer. Too many pieces had fallen into place for me to go back. Not that I wanted to. Counterintelligence was amassing bones and muscle. I could see it clearer than ever, but there were other pre-production operations going in the background, more intimidating stuff, the less fun and creative jobs. I didn't fully know where I was in those whirlwinds. As the creative design of the boat was becoming more than a sketch, the eye of the storm was getting closer, and to truly withstand it, we needed more than design. We needed structure. The stuff that keeps the boat afloat. And float we would. Right into production. After the next episode, pre-produce this movie, part 2. If you're enjoying the podcast, don't forget to subscribe on iTunes or wherever you listen. While you're there, you could totally leave us a rating or a comment or both if you so choose. Those are easy ways to help spread the word to other listeners who like the same stuff as you. Music for the show comes from our film, Counterintelligence, and was composed by the great Noah Simons, who you can find on SoundCloud or Bandcamp as Larians, Larians, and his band, Male Blonding, on Bandcamp, iTunes, and Spotify. They're super good. Make This Movie is brought to you by Showhawk Media. If you're a filmmaker who wants even more useful info and tools, visit showhawk.com/makethismovie and sign up to access our free micro-budget producer starter kit, including template spreadsheets, documents, and other great stuff we covered throughout this series, ready for you to fill in the blanks. That's showhawk.com/makethismovie. Visit counterflick.com for more information on Counterintelligence, the movie, including fun stuff like our satirical fake news page. Also on Facebook is Counterintelligence, Twitter and Instagram @Counterflick. I'm Chris Socker. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
The biggest thing that we deal with, and the biggest thing that most people are afraid of, is one, that SAG-AFTRA is actually in the business of keeping you from making a movie, which is the polar opposite of what their job is. Their job is to help their members work